Alrighty, friends. We're gonna get started tonight. It seems as though some of our GA members were accidentally directed to our fall 2020 Zoom code instead of the code for spring. So if one of our executive board officers could hop on the code from last year or like last semester, and just redirect them to the current code, that would be really, really helpful. I can drop the old code in the chat. It won't load, it's saying recurring. All right, well, maybe we can, one of the executive board officers, if you guys could send a message out via the group chat, again, just to remind everybody of the code situation, that would be very helpful. In the meantime, though, we are going to get started. So welcome everybody to our General Assembly meeting. We're going to start off just like always, calling the roll, starting with our Vice President, Abby.
Hello, everyone. I will now call roll. So when I call the name of your cab, your lead representative should say here, followed by the number of members present for your cab tonight, and then state the answer to our attendance question on the screen, which is, if your cab was an emoji, what emoji would it be? Starting with George Reed and Ray Street. Independence. James Smith and Thomas McKean. North Central.
Here, we have 2 members, and I think we would be the emoji that has a cowboy hat.
Nice.
And I think that the email that you sent out, I couldn't log on to the Zoom, but I could through the GroupMe.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, we are figuring that out as we go along. South Central. South Academy.
Here, 1 member, and I think that if our cab was an emoji, it would probably be the one with the really big star eyes.
Okay, I like that one too. Redding and Gilbert. Harrington. Russell.
Here, 1 member present, and if we were to be an emoji, I would say it would be like the crazy eyes with the tongue sticking out.
Cool, sounds awesome. Lane Thompson Smythe. Okay, any CDC officers on the call who would like to introduce themselves and answer the attendance question?
Here, I think there's technically only 2 of us, including Cyan, but in terms of what emoji we would either be like the upside down smiley face emoji, or actually, I think the upside down smiley face encapsulates us perfectly.
That is my favorite emoji of all time. Thank you, Raptim. Executive board, what emoji would we like to be? What emoji describes us as an e-board?
I think the cone with the confetti coming out of it.
Yeah,
will be us.
The cone with the confetti. I like how we went with like one that's not actually a face. So awesome. All right, so we currently have 3 cabs with representatives present, and a quorum has not been established, but we are working on getting some more members into the call. George, I just got a message saying George Reed is here. George Reed, would you like to identify yourself?
Hi, my name's Sophia.
Hi.
Hi.
How many members do you have here tonight?
I believe it's just me right now.
Okay, no, all good. Thank you for being here. So that makes 4 cabs so far, so a quorum has now been established.
I think we also have South Central too. I don't know if they were included in the quorum.
They were not, but thank you for letting me know. 2, 3.
Awesome.
Okay.
So
Five
for
times.
just to recap, for those who accidentally were on the other code, please complete the attendance form that is on the slides right now, and we can relink it in the chat thereafter. Anything else, Abby, on roll call?
Nope, a quorum has been established.
Perfect. Quorum is established, which means that we can vote tonight, which is what we're going to be doing, which is very exciting. Thank you guys for bearing with us through some of these technical difficulties. We really appreciate it. Just a reminder for tonight for Zoom etiquette, stay muted unless you're called upon. We'd love to see your smiling faces. So if you're able to turn your video on, we'd love to see you guys. And if you have any questions at any time or want to say something, feel free to throw an X in the chat and we will acknowledge you. We're going to skip announcements just for right now. We'll come back to them at the end because we want to jump into the meat and potatoes of the meeting tonight. Tonight, we're going to give an overview of parliamentary procedure, which is what the Resident Student Association uses when we have to vote on amendments and when we hold our executive board elections at the end of the year. So Connor is going to give a overview of ParleyPro for you guys. And then we're going to actually vote on 2 amendments that we're considering adding to our Constitution. So it's going to be a fun night. There's going to be a lot of learning happening and a lot of exciting new things to share. So I'm going to yield to Connor to get us started with ParleyPro.
Hello, everyone. Ryan, can you switch to the next slide, please? So for anyone who doesn't know, I'm also the parliamentarian. That's part of my role. So my job is to make sure the parliamentary procedure is followed through these type of meetings that we're going to have today. So I just want to quickly run through some important roles that you're going to see tonight. The chair is Ryan. He will be the one kind of facilitating the whole process. The parliamentarian is me. I will be making sure that the rules are being followed throughout the night and making sure that we are just abiding by the rules throughout different sections of the amendment process. The recording secretary is Victoria, so she will be keeping minutes of everything that's going on, which she does in every other meeting, but when we are in an amendment process, she takes on a new name. The author for tonight, I believe, will be Ryan, because he will be presenting the amendments that have been written, but that can be a cab or other people that have written the amendment that's being shown. And then the voting members is all of you, the people that get to vote on the amendment tonight. Ryan, next slide, please. Thank you. So this is pretty much how tonight is going to run. So first, a cab, which is usually what will be happening, but tonight Ryan will bring, sorry, let's reel that back. The cab has to motion to bring the proposal to the floor or the amendment to the floor. So that is the first thing that has to happen before we can run through the amendment process. Then the author, who tonight is Ryan, will present those amendments to the voting members and tell you guys what we're trying to change, why we're trying to change it, and how it'll improve RSA as a whole. Then we will go into a section of Q&A between the author and the voting members where you guys get to ask anything that you need clarification on or anything that you're confused about. And then that lasts for about 10 minutes, which is extendable, which we'll get into later. And then we will go through another 10 minutes of discussion where Ryan will leave the meeting, quote unquote, so he'll be put in a breakout room. And the voting members and the e-board members will talk about their opinions of the amendments, just to see if there's a consensus in the room and just gauge everyone's feelings. And then we will end with a vote, which is how we will pass the amendment and make sure that it goes through. Which there's different voting methods that I will get into later. Ryan? So to have anything, to have movement through the amendment process, we require that people make motions, they're called, which is the short process of how to make a motion. So this is very important for you guys, the voting members, because this is how you guys will control the process of the meeting, because us exec board members, we just kind of sit by the wayside and let you guys run through this. So you put next to the chat like you would to talk, and then the chair, aka Ryan, will call on you. And once called upon, you will say, I move to, and then whatever motion you want to do, which we'll get into later, what different motions you have to have different actions happen. Every motion must be seconded by somebody else, preferably another cab. So if like George Reed was to make a motion, then let's just say Lane Thompson Smythe should second it for it to be passed on. And this can be done with either typing second in the chat or this little caret symbol. Thank you, Ryan. And then the chair will be able to see that there's a second and we can move on. Then the chair will ask if there's any dissent or opposition to that motion. So let's say if it was to move on to the discussion period and people were still like, I have questions, then they can say, I have dissent to that. I would like to extend the Q&A instead, something like that. And if so, the chair will pretty much swipe the motion off the table, and then we will try for another motion. Go ahead, Ryan. Before I get into the motions, is there any questions on those parts at all? And if there's questions, please ask them. It'll make it easier if we can get the questions out now so that we can run smoothly through the second half of the meeting. All right, seeing none, I'm going to move into some major motions. I have broken them up by where you will use them. So the first one, which earlier I said that, a voting member will need to move the proposal or the amendment to the floor to be read and to start the whole process. So you would like put it next in the chat and say, I move to bring the proposal to the floor. And then you would have to say, if you've already read it and you don't want to waste the time of having Ryan read it in front of everybody, you can say, I move to waive the reading of the piece. So we can move right into the Q&A part of the amendment. But if people feel that it needs to be read again, then that's also possible. Because most of the time the author will ask if the reading can be waived. Ryan, next slide. Thank you. So then after it's been read or after it's been waived, the amendment will move into the Q&A section. So to get there and to get to any new section of the amendment, we have these to Q&A or to discussion motions where you would say, I move to Q&A or I move to discussion, where we end one section and move on to another. So that is what the first motion would be. And then typically Q&A sessions last for 10 minutes. And then if they ever need to extend, we usually allow one extension. And you would say, I move to extend Q&A by 5 minutes, because that's usually the traditional amount. We like to extend Q&As by 5 minutes one time. So if there's a lot of questions happening and somebody feels that people have a lot of questions and they're not being answered in enough time, then you can extend them. And as the parliamentarian, I will be keeping track of the time. So I will obviously put in the chat like certain time warnings, like if we've had 5 minutes go by, there's 2 minutes left, things like that, so that you can get a gauge on if we need more time or not. Next slide, Ryan. Thank you. So the rules are very similar for the discussion portion. So just like you would say, I move to Q&A, you can say I move to discussion after the Q&A portion has ended. And this will be required to move on to the next part. And then you can also extend discussion by 5 minutes if there's a lot of points being said about the amendment, such as I really like the amendment, but I think they should add this. And then somebody else, comes in on that point and goes, oh, I think this is really great. And I agree with what you're saying, and that I think that would make a better amendment. And let's just say we're talking for a while, and then, I say there's 2 minutes left, and people are like, well, we're having really good conversation here. I'd like to extend by 5 minutes. And again, that can all be extended once. So very similar rules with Q&A and discussion. Next slide, Brian, please. Okay, and then after the discussion, we go into the voting. So you would say, I move to vote, and then there's different kinds of voting that we have here. So I'm going to go into those a little bit. So the most common that we use, which is chosen by the voting member who makes this motion, they get to choose between a few different kinds. So we do hand raise, which would usually be if we were in person, you would like raise your hand. But tonight, to kind of have the same thing in a virtual space, if you open up your participants window or the reactions window, there will be a little yes, no at the bottom, whether it be a green check or a red X. That is how we will vote by hand raise tonight. And then at the bottom, it'll get counted. Like, for example, if you guys look at the participants window, Ryan put a little check mark there, and now he put a little X saying that either he passes the amendment or he doesn't, depending on what he puts. So that's one option. Secret ballot is another option where each of you would private message probably me, the parliamentarian, with your votes, either yes or no to the amendment, and it stays secret. And then at the end, I just say if it passes or not. And then the other one is consensus, where if you as the person making the motion feels that there's a general opinion in the room, that everyone is in agreement, then you can say, I prefer to vote by consensus. And then you say the consensus that you feel, and then we see if there's any dissent. And if there's dissent, then that obviously that voting method does not work, and we would have to go to another kind. But most commonly used is hand raise. But anyway, I digress. The next slide, Ryan, please. So if there's any more questions that you have, you can go to this resource to get them if you don't ask them tonight, which is our website. We have a web page all about this. But barring that, does anyone have any questions for me now on how this works? Because we're about to dive right into using it. Thank you, Abby. That's very helpful. If not, I pass it back to Ryan.
Thank you, Connor. So that was a lot of information and a very quick overview of Parley Pro. And I think the best way to learn in a lot of cases is to practice and to do. So we're going to have 2 opportunities tonight to practice Parley Pro. One thing that I think like just Connor talked about a little bit, but like, you know, people don't really realize is Parley Pro is used a lot. If you ever have the opportunity to serve like on a local school board or a township board or a board of directors, like they all use Parley Pro. So this is like a really, really rewarding experience if you do have those aspirations like down the line to get some experience doing that. So I'm excited for you guys, and I'm excited to propose some amendments tonight. Just to do a very quick recap of what this process is going to look like. We're going to accept a motion from you guys to bring a amendment to the floor. As you guys might know, in our last email last week, we sent you guys 2 pieces that you were supposed to just like go over and take a look at. If you didn't, no worries. We're going to do a overview for you guys tonight, which is the proponent speech for each amendment. We'll then yield for 10 minutes of question and answer. So you guys will have the chance to ask me any questions you have about the amendment we're proposing. And then I will leave the room and I'll go into a little breakout room by myself. And y'all will have the chance to discuss on the amendment about whether or not you want to approve it or not. You'll then take a vote and you need a 2/3 majority. Connor, you had a question.
Yeah, I forgot to say one little thing. So since Ryan is the author tonight, he will not be playing the chair role because he will be playing the author role. So the chair role actually goes to Abby in this situation because she's the vice president. It gets passed over and down. So she will be making sure that, like, so if you're, you know, she'll take control of the X's and things like that. So just wanted to put that out there because this is not like normally how it would run. If a cab was doing it, then Ryan would be the chair. I just want to make sure there's no confusion.
Sounds good. Alrighty, so let's get started. We're looking for a motion to bring MMRSA GA 2021-04, aka the Emergency Powers Amendment, to the floor. All right, we got an X from Rock Tim. State your motion, Rock Tim.
I'm sorry, but which is the motion for you to read said article?
So you would say, I move to bring MMRSA blah, blah, blah.
Got it. All right, then I move to bring MMRSA GA 2021-04 to the floor.
All right, do you have a second? So that'd be the little caret from any of our GA members. Awesome. I see a second from Sophia at George Reed. Is that right? God, awesome. So second from George Reed. All right, so that then begins my proponent speech. But first, we're going to accept a motion to waive the reading of the piece, which would be another X. Essentially, we have this document, right, that's like a couple pages long. And the option is we can read it aloud for everybody to hear, or we can waive the reading so we don't have to do that. But we need a motion from someone to waive the reading, unless there is no motion and y'all want us to read the amendment out, which we can do.
How do we motion to move on again? I'm so sorry.
Waive the reading of the piece.
Leave the reading.
You would put it next to the chat to be able to make a motion.
Cree's good. She got it. Do we have a second? A caret. Second from Rock Tim. Perfect. All righty. So that begins my proponent speech. and I will get started. Alrighty, everybody. So this amendment, aka the Emergency Powers Clause, does three things. This amendment expands, or it gives the Executive Board of RSA 3 emergency powers. It allows us to, in an emergency situation, a school break, a closure, a situation like COVID, it allows us to expand eligibility to serve on the Executive Board. Currently, to serve on the Executive Board, you need to have been a student living on campus for 2 semesters. So obviously with COVID, you can see how that might be a problem. It allows us to, in an emergency situation, expand eligibility to serve as a voting General Assembly member. Traditionally, in order to be a voting General Assembly member, you have to be living on campus. So if there is, going forward into the future, another situation where there are no students on campus, that kind of prevents us from having a GA, which causes issues for our ability to operate and continue our operations. And then lastly, what the Emergency Powers Clause allows us to do is, in an emergency situation, disperse funds from our emergency budget. So we have about $5,000 set aside that's untouchable, that we can't touch unless there is an emergency situation. So this amendment to our Constitution essentially gives us these 3 powers in an emergency situation that arises. So why are we asking for these powers? Why are we looking for this amendment to pass? So as I mentioned before, traditionally our General Assembly is only for students who are living on campus. But as you guys are aware, with COVID-19, there was a portion of last spring semester where there was nobody on campus. There was a portion of last fall where only about 1,000 students were on campus. And even this semester, we're kind of limited with the number of students that are living in residence halls. We typically have about 7,000, and we're right now at about 4,000. Based on our Constitution, if there are no students living on campus, then we can't have a GA, which means that RSA can't really operate, right? So essentially, these powers would allow us to say, for this year, right? For this year, you don't have to live on campus to be a General Assembly member for RSA without making like a very large structural change to our Constitution and the way that we operate. The other key reason here is that the GA is the only body with the power to approve amendments. So if we don't have the ability to create a GA during a time where there is like an emergency or a pandemic, then we can't really operate because we can't pass amendments like this amendment we're looking to pass today. And then lastly, like what checks and balances are in place, right? We're asking for some pretty important powers, right? Like expanding eligibility to our GA and to our Executive Board and using money. These are all very important things. So it's crucial that there's some type of check to make sure that this power doesn't go, unchecked or to the heads of the Executive Board. So there's 4 things that we integrated into this amendment to prevent those situations. So first of all, we can't use these powers unless there's an emergency, an unexpected closure of the university, or a situation that threatens RSA's ability to operate. So it's a continuity question. Second, they have to be enacted individually on a 2/3 majority. So each of these powers, each of these individual powers are mutually exclusive. So a 2/3 majority vote of the Executive Board is required to approve of expanding eligibility for the GA, separate from expanding eligibility from the Executive Board, separate from using money for our emergency budget. So they're all individual, and they each would require a 2/3 majority vote of the E-Board to approve, which is a pretty big deal. Third is that the execution of these powers only lasts for a year. So if we expand eligibility to serve on the Executive Board, that expansion will only last 1 academic year, and it will expire after that point in time. So the board has to reassess whether or not we're in an emergency situation that would require that change. And then lastly, we have included the ability for emergency powers to be repealed before the date of expiration via a simple majority vote of the Executive Board. So if we're no longer in a school closure, or there's no longer a case where there's an emergency situation happening, the Executive Board can very easily, very simply revoke that emergency power and go back to standard operations. So that's just like a very basic overview of the amendment and what we're looking to do here. This is something that's really, really important for RSA because without it, we're not going to be able to operate, and it's going to make us make it a bit more challenging next year or this at the end of this year to hold our elections, which is why we're asking for your approval for this amendment right now. With that, I'm going to yield for any questions that you guys have.
So to do that, we would need a motion to Q&A. So
So just
all
to
you guys
clarify,
need-
a motion to move into question and answer.
correct.
So
Motion
an
to
X
Q-
and then a second.
Is that I just have to say motion to Q&A? Or are
Yep.
we like, so if we don't have questions, what would we, do we like end it or does it keep going?
If you don't have questions, then you would say I move to discussion at the end if there isn't questions by anybody else, but there may be
Okay.
questions from other GA members. So that was a motion. Can we get a second? Awesome. So Q&A has officially opened. So if anyone has any questions, please put an X in the chat and then Ryan will answer them.
Yeah, Justine?
My question would be if we pass this amendment today, would we put this into motion like right away? Like this plan of emergency, because we are currently in this situation. Would this be go into plan right now?
That's a really good question. So the intention of the executive board, just for full transparency, if this motion or if this amendment is added to our constitution, would likely be to institute the emergency powers clause for this year into next year. Specifically, we're looking to expand eligibility to the executive board, which would allow students who only lived on campus for like one semester to get involved with our executive board, as opposed to the traditional 2-semester limit, which would basically exclude nearly all current freshmen and even some sophomores from serving on our board, which we don't want. Any other questions? Tim?
Are we able to make a motion to move on to discussion? All right.
Yes, you may.
I move to, or is it I move to move on to discussion?
It's just I move to discussion.
All right,
Just
I
one
move
I
to
move.
discussion.
Is there a second? A second from Cree and Lisa. So we move on to discussion, which means Ryan, you'll have to go and put yourself in a breakout room while we discuss, and then we'll have somebody come and get you when we're done.
Everybody ignore the breakout room I just created. I'm about to hop in it. Thank you, Connor.
This isn't
No
gonna
problem.
end again, will it?
Hmm?
This isn't gonna do the same thing it did last semester and accidentally end the meeting when you go into a breakout room, right?
No.
It should not.
Okay. Ryan, it failed. Sorry.
Haha, very funny. Thank you, team. I'm going to reshare the slides and we will roll into our next amendment. Thank you guys for bearing with us. We know this process is a learning experience and that means it's not always fun, but election reform amendment. Who's chairing this one? Me? Okay. Can we get a motion to bring MMRSA GA 2021-03 to the floor?
I motion to bring MMRSA GA 2021-03 to the floor.
Amazing. Do we have a second? Second from Sylvia. All right. Can I get a motion to waive the reading of the piece? If we have to read this, it's going to take like 20 to 30 minutes. So
I motion the waive of reading the piece.
yeah, it's right. Second from Hannah. Love to see all the participation. This is great. I am going to roll right into the proponent speech then. Thank you, guys. Alrighty. So this amendment, which is titled the Election Reform Amendment, is longer than the Emergency Powers Amendment, but it does less. It's more of just a clarification amendment and a reconfiguring amendment, as opposed to one that actually adds a lot of substance to our Constitution. So basically what this amendment does is it clarifies the RSA e-board election process by doing three things. It defines 3 ways for students to join the RSA executive board: general elections, vacancy elections, and recess appointments. All of these processes have existed in some form in our Constitution prior to this amendment, but they haven't been very clearly denoted as to how the process actually works for students to join our executive board via our annual general elections, via a election that happens in the middle of the year due to a vacancy, and an election that happens over, or a appointment that happens over the summer or during a winter session, or any time that RSA is like on break. The other 2 things that this amendment does is it unifies the requirement for candidate speeches. So in the past, there were different requirements for the general election candidate speeches, the vacancy election candidate speeches, and the requirements for students who wanted to join our executive board via a recess appointment. So what we did in this amendment is we cut down all of the language that was there before into one simple process that can be essentially leveraged for each type of election or appointment that we might have. And then lastly, what the amendment does is it creates a process for recess appointments during emergency time periods. You guys are probably seeing a theme here with our amendments tonight. In the past, if we were at a school break or a school closure, our Constitution would essentially designate the vice president, this year Abby, to come up with a process in case we lost an officer, if an officer quit, if an officer was impeached, and we would kind of have to figure it out as we went along. What this amendment does is it basically leverages some of the requirements and processes from general elections and vacancy elections to create a process for recess appointments. So if we are in an emergency situation, if the school is closed and we have an executive board member who drops their position or is impeached, we have a very simple process that is clear and easy to follow for how a new student can join our executive board in that case. So I kind of touched on a little bit of this, but why is it important for RSA? Our Constitution, as I said, is pretty unclear about the process for general elections and appointments. It's very general, but it doesn't go into specifics about how the process is supposed to work, which for an e-board like ourselves, who we've all sort of been involved with RSA for a long time, and we've been involved with RSA since our freshman years, a lot of us, we have context for what elections traditionally look like. But in the future, if there's an e-board with more newer members, it might be helpful for there to be a more specific guide as to how elections are supposed to run, which is why we want to integrate this into our Constitution. The updated language, as I said, it reduces uncertainty and will hopefully help future boards navigate vacancies a bit more effectively than we have in the past. And lastly, similar to the Emergency Powers Clause, this amendment allows RSA to continue its operations in the event of a school closure. So before the recess appointment process was very unclear, now we have a very clear-cut way for a student to join the executive board if there is a vacancy during a global pandemic or another situation that forces the university to close. So in a nutshell, those are all of the things that this amendment does and why it's really, really important preceding our upcoming executive board elections, which will be announced next week, to have this amendment passed. So it's easier for us and it's easier for you to navigate the process. I can answer more specifics about general elections, vacancy elections, and recess appointments in the Q&A section if you guys have any questions. But with that, I will yield.
Awesome. So now we need a motion to move to Q&A or question and answer.
I motion to move to Q&A.
Awesome. So now we'll have 10 minutes to ask questions to Ryan about the amendment. It would be great if we can get at least one question in here, just so we don't have the Q&A without any.
So, sorry. Just to clarify, it just making it so the rules and like roles and ways to apply is more universal instead of having a different process for each type, right?
Yep. So that's really the bulk of it. Is, as you guys will see at the end of the year, when it comes to our elections, we do these things called candidate speeches, and the process for those, for some reason, in the past has been different for how it works and how the vice president is supposed to coordinate those. So what we wanted to do is, in this time, because it's a good time to be like fixing things, fix that process so that it's more uniform for each type of method of getting onto the executive board. Hopefully that answered your question.
It did, thank you.
Of course. Anybody else? Be happy to go into more detail if y'all have questions.
Is there any expansion of like people who can vote for different positions, or is this just for clarification and just for like redesigning the rules so it's more straightforward?
That is a very good question, Rocktim. So let me explain it just like this way. So there's 3 ways to get onto the executive board. You have general elections, vacancy elections, and recess appointments. The voting body, which I think is at the core of your question, is different for each of those. So for general elections, those are campus-wide. So all students who are living on campus in residence halls or apartments, they make up the voting body. In the event that there's a vacancy in the middle of the year when the GA is in session, like right now, for instance, if Abby decided that she was done RSA, she had enough of my shenanigans and decided to drop, the voting body in that case would be the General Assembly. So you guys would actually hear out a panel of candidates who are interested in joining, and y'all would vote. If we are in a school break, closure, whatever the situation is, the executive board in that instance then votes via a 2/3 majority to add that member to the executive board. Then once the school opens again, that individual who joined the executive board during the recess is confirmed by the General Assembly. Just how President Biden can nominate someone to be in his cabinet and the Senate confirms that individual, you guys essentially serve in that role where we nominate someone for the time being to serve in the role over the break, and you guys confirm them as a individual who's well suited for the role.
All right, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions?
If there are also no other questions, we can have someone motion to move to discussion.
I motion to move to discussion.
Awesome. Seeing a second, we move into discussion.
Because we do a lot of X's and seconds and stuff, the line is just to end that line of conversation so that the next time we do it, there's no confusion between the previous X or comment and the next one.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right, y'all. I heard the good news that both amendments have passed. I'm super excited. This is going to make our lives and your lives much easier because it is likely going to mean that everyone on this call will be eligible to run for RSA's executive board next year. So that's very, very exciting. And we'll have more details on that next week. I want to jump back to the beginning of the meeting and give Roxana a chance to tell us all about some upcoming RSA events before ending us out tonight. Thanks, Roxana. You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. Moving along to some events coming up next week is our Core Valley recognition. So starting with recognition week, we'll be getting off the months on the mark, which will be on Monday, April 29th from 3:30 to 4:30 at the same Zoom code, so 923, 9047. And well, I won't say the whole thing, but it's there. You'll see it on your screen. And then after that, the next GA meeting, there will be a housing roundtable, and that will be on Thursday, April 1st from 7 to 8. And you can get some questions that you guys have there. And then our last event will be air hives and beehives, Monday, April 2, from 12 to 2 p.m. And that will be actually in person at Perkins. So watch out for that at Perkins. So it's a grab and go station. It's going to be there an hour. Again, end of the year banquet. Exciting will be on Saturday, May 15th. May 15th. And it will be end of the year celebration from 6 to 8. And that's all.
Thank you, Roxana. I'm gonna skip ahead. Sorry, the announcements was at the beginning of the meeting. To just another reminder, Roxana mentioned it, our next GA meeting next Thursday, April 1st from 7 to 8. This is going to be, a very, very important meeting because we have a guest speaker and we're going to be learning about RSA e-board elections. So next Thursday, April 1st from 7 to 8, we're going to give an overview of our upcoming executive board elections. I know it kind of feels wild, like y'all were just elected to CAB positions, but we're kind of just in this weird world right now. We have to be really agile, and our executive board is ending our terms at the end of this year. So we're looking for, very passionate, committed, engaged students to serve on our executive board next year. So Abby's going to give an overview of our executive board elections, and we're going to be hearing from Michelle Kane at Residence-Housing. As you guys know, the housing application went out recently. So you guys will have the opportunity to apply for housing next year. There are a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, a lot of things that that you guys probably want to know some insider scoop on. And that's why Michelle is going to be coming to this meeting. So I encourage you all to bring your friends. If you have friends on your cab, friends who are living in your residence hall, this is going to be like not entirely a roundtable conversation. There's going to be a presentation and then a chance to ask questions, but it's a good opportunity for any student who's A, interested in student leadership, and B, wants to learn more about the housing app and get some insider scoop. Please invite your friends, and we'll have a grand time together next Thursday. You can follow us as always on all of our social media platforms. That's another area where we send out all of the meeting updates and all of the event updates for anything that RSA is doing. So if you have a social media account, feel free to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you can check us out on our website. It's really, really helpful for you to relay information back to your cabs. Point system update. I don't know, is Griffin on the call right now? I don't think he is. But right now, for the RSA point system, which we discussed last week, South Central is in the lead. They currently have 5 points. LTS is close behind with 3 points, and Russell and South Academy have 2 each. As a reminder, we're going to be giving away some custom swag for your cab at the end of the year for the cab that has the most points. So as we discussed last week, there are a lot of ways to get points: attending our meetings, leading programs and advocacy initiatives in your communities, and applying for programming and advocacy grant resources from RSA, which is kind of a win-win. You get points, you get resources from RSA, and your community gets a boost as well. So wanted to give you guys an update on that. And then finally, as we wrap up the meeting tonight, to do some baby blue recognition. The first week, sorry, I saw a message in the chat. The first week, LTS received baby blue, and the second week, South Central had baby blue. So it is now South Central's turn to pass baby blue off to another cab. So I know, Justine, you're on the call, right?
That's correct. I'm here.
Cool. So you have the chance to select another community advocacy board and recognize them for their efforts and pass Baby Blue off to them.
I have a quick question though. Does Baby Blue go is like the R like is the what's it called, the RCL RHC RHC, the RHC has the Baby Blue, right?
Yes. So Baby Blue is currently in the RSA office because we didn't get it back from LTS. Like we got it back kind of late. So for the cab that you give Baby Blue to this week, they can pick Baby Blue up from the RSA office.
Okay, because I was wondering, because I was like, I don't think we got Baby Blue, but
Yeah,
it's okay.
you guys didn't. I'm very sorry, but you'll probably have a chance before the end of the semester. So who are you guys passing Baby Blue off to this week?
Russell. Does Russell not have it already?
Russell has not had it yet, no.
Well, then we'll give it to Russell.
Awesome. Congrats to Russell's cab for getting Baby Blue this week. And Jordan, you're our advisor if you want to come to the office and pick up Baby Blue, or if any of your cab members want to swing by our office in Perkins, you can pick up Baby Blue as well. Thank you so much, Justine. Alrighty, that is it for tonight. I know this was a very, policy and constitution related meeting. So if you guys have any questions about serving on your cab in your community, an advocacy or a programming idea that you are working on and you're looking for some help, I'm down to hang out for the next like 15-20 minutes and talk if anybody wants to just hang or has questions. Otherwise, meeting adjourned. Thank you guys all for a wonderful, wonderful meeting and for participating in our amendment process. We'll see you all next week. Have a great night.
Thanks, Ryan.
Of course. Thank you, friends.